Hello everyone from Istanbul School. Dear viewers, our guest is Prof. Dr. Ali Bardakoğlu. Welcome, teacher.
Thank you.
Teacher, how should we read the Quran and the Hadiths and how should we understand them?
It is an extremely important issue because the Quran is the main source of our religion, our holy book and Allah's address to us. Hadith, Sunnah, the legacy of our Prophet, the Prophet of this religion, the last Prophet, what he wanted from us, the exemplary morality he told us, both are extremely important in terms of showing us how to understand and learn our religion, and the Quran, the book and the Sunnah, as the two sources of our religion, have always been important for Muslims. However, there are some preliminary information that we need to know in order to read the Quran. First, the Quran came gradually in 23 years during the 23 years of our Prophet's prophethood. It came upon events and came in the form of an address. It did not come as a book, it came as an address. The transformation of this address into Mustafa was in the Caliph's period. Neither the Sunnah nor the Hadiths of our Prophet were in the form of a discourse, an address to the void. It came from life. He constantly warned the people around him and showed him the right way. They consulted our Prophet. Our Prophet said, don't do this, do that. For example, in Mecca, he held the hands of the poor, the helpless and protected them. He opposed the oppression of slaves and concubines. He criticized the class perception and aristocratic attitudes of the Meccans. In other words, he provided guidance through life by teaching and teaching.
All of these also show the formation process of religious thoughts.
So why did I tell you this? We need to understand the verses of the Holy Quran and the Hadiths of our Prophet by establishing their connection with the events. Otherwise, if we take a verse of the Quran and turn it into a slogan, or if we take the words of a Hadith and interpret it as a very general expression, as a principle that will last until the end of time, we can make mistakes.
This is perhaps one of our biggest mistakes because we take the verse out of its context and take it in isolation.
For example, the attitude of the verses towards Christians. First of all, the Quran never took Judaism and Christianity against itself. It criticized Christians and Jews, and which ones did wrong, the Christians and the Jews. In other words, does the Quran criticize a prophet Moses or a prophet Jesus? Of course not. The Torah and the Bible, like the Quran, are works of God's revelation. But because Christians and Jews distorted it, exploited it, and used it as a tool for their own interests, the Quran always criticized the people of the book. Do not make these mistakes. Do not make these mistakes. Do not make these mistakes. Do not make these mistakes to your prophets. You disobeyed him. You did not listen to him. And this became a warning to the Muslims. In other words, the Muslims said, you should also learn a lesson from this. Because it was like this, and because it was like this, the relations of the Quran with the Meccans were according to the color of the events of that day. At times it talked about his virtues. At times it pointed out their mistakes to their faces. At times it complimented the Christians, but also warned them about what they were doing wrong. So we should think of the Quran's address as intertwined with the events. Think about its context and not rush to make a judgment without knowing the context in which it came. In fact, we should not read the Quran to derive judgments. We should read it to learn a lesson, to take a lesson, to realize what Allah is saying to us. The work of deriving judgments is the work of sciences such as fiqh and kalam. Because sciences such as fiqh and kalam later took the verses of the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet, abstracted them, and derived principles from them. Because we cannot consider the verses of the Holy Quran as a legal text, or the hadiths as a legal text. In fact, we should not be hasty in deriving such a judgment from it, because in the general flow of life there may be hadiths that seem to contradict each other. But why do they seem to contradict? That was what had to be said that day. In another event, it should have been said differently.
In other words, sentences that are based on place and time.
The Prophet Muhammad always did what was most correct, most reasonable, most appropriate, and in line with the common conscience of people. But sometimes it was necessary to fight, sometimes it was necessary to make an agreement. He did that. A companion asked what the best deed was. He said to serve your mother and father. Another asked, he said to help others, to give alms. Another said to do jihad. Another said to continue worshipping. But he also warned those who devoted themselves to worship day and night. He said their children have rights, the society has rights, their family have rights, they will be fulfilled as well. He went to the Medina market and warned them. He said, "Do not deceive people by mixing good goods with bad goods. Do not meet those who come from the street and buy the producer's goods cheaply. Do not be unjust. Be fair in measuring and weighing. Do not interfere with prices. Let people shop freely and securely." Look, every hadith, every warning has a meaning. We must understand the Holy Quran together with the Quranic culture and magic.
Even though it was centuries ago, all our issues are still the same. Not lying, not trespassing on the truth. We interpret these in the same way today. In fact, we can say that these were said according to the period and place, but we are experiencing the same things today. In fact, we need to look at them from the same perspective.
Exactly. Anyway, the message of the Holy Quran is to explain these things through examples and facts. Case studies are temporary. We cannot relive the conditions of Medina again. There is no religious principle that we should live the original bliss exactly, but we have to grasp the main idea that dominates and directs the real bliss.
How can we differentiate this, Hoja? I mean, why should we use miswak as a good deed when we have a toothbrush in our hands?
Okay, now that means that forms and shapes are temporary. The message given through them is permanent.
What is essential, what is constant, is the message we need to receive.
In other words, if we need to comply with the sunnah of our Prophet today, we don't have to wear the same clothes. We need to bring the principles from the morality of the Prophet into our lives. There is already a literature called Leviyat, Fatma Hanim. Look, this is important. It starts with Haz Aisha. It starts with the sentence, "If the Prophet were alive today." It starts with Lev Kanan Nabi. If the Prophet were alive today, what would he do? The question is extremely meaningful, and the answer we give to this question means deducing the sunnah from the hadiths. Hadiths are words that have been transmitted according to events, anecdotes. The sunnah, on the other hand, are the principles we will derive from it. There are verses. Verses are the intervention, explanation, and guidance of the revelation to Allah according to each event. Look, pay attention. Our old tradition is very cautious and has made a very fine distinction. It has made a distinction between the Quran and the book. It has made a distinction between the hadith and the sunnah. The verses are, of course, the crown of our crown. You cannot take a verse, turn it into a slogan, and pile up your many desires, angers, and expectations on that verse. We need to think about that verse, other verses, the reason for revelation, the environment, and the general message of the Quran. Therefore, the Quranic verses can be read to see its wisdom, to understand the essence of the message, and to gain moral advice. However, if we take the Quranic verses and immediately make judgments based on them, we can make mistakes. Also, this is important, Fatma Hanim. Some of the events narrated in the Quranic verse are things that no longer have an equivalent in our world. For example, we talk about slaves and concubines. We do not need to have slaves or concubines in order to be good Muslims. Every individual should ask the question of what my Lord is saying to me, what he wants from me, what he wants to tell me while reading the Quran. He definitely has something to say to us. You can read the Quran every morning as Allah's special address to you.
It is a very valuable thing for the Creator to address Himself and to say something directly to Him.
Two things are very important. First, we stand before Allah with prayer. We go directly to Allah without knocking on His door. We call prayer the believer's ascension. Second, we hear Allah's address to us by reading the Quran. If my servant can feel the address in his inner world while reading the Quran, it means that he is reading the Quran well. It means that he has started to understand it well. But if he wanders through the verses of the Quran in a way that suits his own thoughts, looking for a verse that suits his own intentions, thoughts, desires, hatred, anger, then that person will not benefit much from the Quran. Because the Holy Quran is a book of guidance. It is a book of invitation to religion. It is a book of awareness. It is not a book of information.
Okay, teacher, let's talk a little bit about hadiths. The hadith books on the market, or the reflection of hadiths today.
In other words, the hadiths of our Prophet have always been translated for commercial purposes, and there are plenty of them in Turkish. It is a big mistake to take these hadiths and immediately try to draw a rule from them, and it means completely ignoring the sunnah of the Prophet. I say seriously, I mean to take the texts of the hadiths and take such 10 cd, 12 side, 15 sid hadiths and say, look, our Prophet said this, the clerics are telling us wrong, this is wrong, the hadith is like this, etc., is a complete example of ignorance. Each hadith has its own context, and it is necessary to give it a meaning within the whole. I find it correct to read hadiths of morality such as Edeb ul Mufet and hadiths of morality meviz, advice such as Riyazi Salihin. However, I think that reading hadiths on issues such as when is imsak, when is sahur can mislead people, because it is necessary to perform a scientific deduction contemplation operation, scientific abstractions and some relations to them. It would be extremely wrong to give meaning to words without the methodological perspective of religious sciences, that is, without background knowledge. It is not enough to know Arabic to understand the Quran and the Hadiths. If it were enough to know Arabic, there should be 300, 400 million Islamic scholars. After knowing Arabic, it is necessary to discover the meaning of that verse, that Hadith in its entirety. It may be misleading to use the verses and Hadiths hastily without a methodological and holistic perspective. In this respect, the Quran is the main source of our religion. The Sunnah of our Prophet is very important. But in this regard, we need to take holistic perspectives by using the possibilities offered to us by tradition and the scientific perspective, reason and conscience. I say, let's not make the Qurani Sunnah speak our whims and desires by being content with fragmented sentences.
Okay, thank you very much, teacher. Once again, you have helped us benefit from your valuable comments. Dear viewers, Prof. Dr. Ali Bardakoğlu was our guest. See you in our next program. Goodbye.